tonight to be as inclusive as possible. So we're aware that you'll be joining from different places and different things like that. So some features that might be useful for you tonight is to turn on captions. So if you're in a loud environment or somewhere where there's background noise, you can go up to your settings up at the top, up at more, and you can click accessibility and turn the captions on. The other thing that you might want to do is if you want to be able to see the slides in full screen, you can click the view option up at the top and click full screen, and that just takes some of the kind of toolbars and things away for you. And the other thing, if like me, the binging from people typing in the chat starts to drive you up the wall, you can go onto your Teams page. So if you're on the app, that's on your the bit that you sign in on. If you're using it through the browser, that's normally right up at the top. You can click to your little drop down arrow and click do not disturb, and then that way you're not going to get any of the binging noises coming through. What I would say to you with that is remember to turn it back on to available after the webinar, or nobody will be able to reach you for the foreseeable future. So, as I said tonight, we are here to explore some of the benefits that dogs can bring if they are visiting your educational setting. We're going to discuss some of the key considerations that are really important for you to think about. Things that are general things to consider when thinking about inviting dogs, and also some things that will be more setting specific in terms of the pupils and the staff and the spaces and things like that. And we're also delighted tonight to be joined by two practitioners who have been involved in therapy visits, which you'll hear a little bit more about, and they're going to share their experiences of having dogs visiting their setting. We're aware tonight that on the call there's people from lots of different types of backgrounds, so having a quick scan down the list, I can see that there are people from senior leadership roles, local authority roles, some of you are practitioner based, so you'll have different questions as we go through tonight, and that's absolutely okay. We understand that people are here for lots of different reasons. For some of you, you're in the sort of final stages of arranging dog visits to your school, and you're just really wanting to make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. For some of you, this is really just the first step in your journey about thinking about, is it a possibility? So again, as we go through, hopefully most of your questions will be answered, but feel free to pop them into the chat. Tonight, I am joined by Mel Hughes, who you'll see on screen, and Mel is the CEO of the Canine Concern Scotland Trust, who oversee the therapy visiting programme. And Mel's going to be delivering what I would say is the bulk of tonight's session. For those of you who don't know me, or you maybe do recognise me and wonder why the maths lady from Education Scotland is delivering this webinar, my name's Yvonne Somerville. I work with Education Scotland in the numeracy and maths team, but tonight I am here wearing a different hat, in that I am here to talk about my experience as a TheraPet volunteer with my dog Marley that you can see on screen there. And as I said, we are delighted to be joined by two practitioners. So we've got Emma Taylor, who joins us from Braes High School in Falkirk, who's here to talk to us about the work that they've done with their TheraPet Jamie. And we're also delighted to be joined by Ailey Clark, who is from Niddry Mill Primary School in Edinburgh, who will be talking about the work that they have done with their TheraPet Sylvie. And for those of you eagle-eyed people out there, you might recognise Sylvie as being a little bit of a celebrity from one of the CBeebies shows, but I'm sure Mel will tell you a little bit more about that as we go. So as I say, as we go through, please pop questions in the chat. That's what Janine's there to pick these up, and we will stop quite kind of towards the end to give enough time for lots of questions to come in. And we thought it wouldn't be quite right to start the webinar without a wee dog-themed connector here. So you'll see on screen here is the many faces of Marley, and we'd like you just to pop into the chat which Marley represents best how you feel today. So I'll give you a wee minute just to have a wee look and decide which Marley looks like you today. We've got some threes, some chilled out people, that's good. And we've got some fives, studious at their laptops. Not seeing any sixes coming in yet. Hopefully we've not put anybody to sleep just yet. Lots of fives, lots of people eager to listen, I think, Mel. So without further ado, will hand you over to Mel. And Mel, you can just let me know when you'd like me to move the slides on for you.
Great. Thanks very much, Yvonne. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, good. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming along this afternoon, finding out about what we do, a little bit more detail about our service. And thank you very much to the two ladies from the schools that we have visited for some time now for their input today, and also to Yvonne for putting together all the slides. She's done a great job. Thanks, Yvonne. Right, so I'll tell you a little bit about the TheraPet service. We've been running now the charity for 35 years, Canine Concern Scotland Trust. And TheraPet, the term TheraPet is actually trademarked to us. So any dogs that you see that are TheraPets, you'll see with the coloured bandanas or the yellow and white TheraPet lead flash. If you see one of theirs, you know that they have been assessed and approved to work as a TheraPet by us. And we'll go through what we're looking for in a dog shortly. Yvonne's going to do that for you. Now, we've had over 4,000 dogs through the programme since we started 35 years ago. And at the moment, as of today, we have, hot off the press, 958 dogs and 5 cats across Scotland, from as far north as Orkney right down to Dumfries and Galloway. Obviously, our biggest area is the central belt of Scotland. We've been working in schools now and with children right from the start, but schools probably more for about 10 years when we put in place our Reading with Dogs programme. And we've got other programmes that we work with, an educational programme, for instance, for youngsters who are in sort of middle primary school age, and that's called Children and Dogs. And that's on our website, you'll find a little film which has a link there. It's in YouTube. You can find information on, it's 15 to 17 minutes long, and it's all about looking after your own pet safely, but also being safe around other dogs out in the environment. So there's that. What we've also been finding, probably since the pandemic, is that a lot of our work in schools, and particularly in high schools, which is an area where we've really grown, has been helping students and pupils who, and even staff members who are struggling with being back in the school, anxiety, grief, mental health issues, all sorts of things. So learning disabilities, struggling with accessing learning and education are really the key areas that we've been supporting pupils in. But we've worked with probably over 25,000 people around Scotland every year. All of our work is free. We're a charity, so we don't ask for any fees for anything. And it's part of my job to get the funding for all of that. So as I said, we're in about 100 schools around Scotland. We would love to be in more, but we have certain criteria in place based on that sort of 35 years of experience to make sure that the dogs that we're putting into schools are exactly the right fit for schools. So we've got sort of structures that we put in place. We don't just take a dog in right away and then say, okay, you can start in a school next week. And a lot of you, I know, will know of schools which have got dogs in that are not related to the work that we do. But we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to focus on sort of what we are doing, just to give you an idea of different models of what's around and available. So if we look at the next slide, we've got, what is a TheraPet? A TheraPet is a family pet. It is not an assistance dog. So your assistance dogs are primarily your guide dogs, your hearing dogs, your search and rescue dogs, your medical alert dogs. So we are only allowed to visit places where we have been invited. So we do go into police stations, prisons, we go into shops, but again, it's only places where regular dogs are permitted or we have been invited to run a session. We work a lot with colleges and universities helping students with exam stress and other sort of Freshers Week as well. So there's lots of things on. But we're in over 300 care homes in Scotland. We also work in the hospices and the all of the NHS boards. So we have a huge presence around Scotland. We're probably the biggest charity or organisation that's offering this service around Scotland. Aberdeen Airport, you might have flown in and out of there. You might have seen our canine crew. They're very, very popular and they help nervous flyers. Maybe doesn't work if you're nervous and you're scared of dogs, but you know, it's pretty obvious. We'd never ever force anyone to engage with a dog. And the whole point of our service, it started back in 1988. It was really focusing on the well-being of dogs, because in those days there was no social media, You know, there was 2 or 3 channels on TV, so it was very difficult to get information around. We've got scores of handwritten notes backwards and forwards to STV, BBC, Maggie Thatcher, from the lady who started the charity, our founder, Marjorie. And it's all about, you know, the welfare and the well-being of dogs and the promotion of dogs in a positive way. And nowadays, of course, all of that's done on social media, both positive and negative. So it's really about making sure that the dogs are enjoying what they're doing as well. And that's one of the key things whenever we go into these places. So that list of places that we have there, we will try and match up the volunteer with what they want to do, but actually more importantly with what suits the dog that they have. Because I have 5 dogs, so apologies if we get any barking, and a cat. It's not for all of them. Only one of my dogs is actually a therapet, and he's the only one that has the right sort of temperament and is suitable to go into venues such as schools, for instance. So it's a fantastic service. My background, actually, I'm a high school teacher to trade, and after 20 odd years in teaching and 9 years as a head teacher myself, I understand everything behind the whole policies of risk assessments and making sure you've got the right insurance, making sure that everything's in place in the school to support your learners. We often feel that learners support, dogs and any animals that children can engage with are fantastic for their learning, but sometimes we forget about actually, should that dog be in that room for however many hours, and you know, what happens when the dog needs a break. So it's about those little things that we're hoping to give you some signposts for tonight, and make sure that you've got some resources to take away with you if you are looking at ways of maybe having a dog in your school. Because it's a huge thing these days. It just seems to have, we've been, as I say, we've been doing it for a long time, but it just has taken off with social media. We basically, if you're interested in our services, you have to get in touch with our office and request a volunteer. And then generally we're putting on a waiting list because we don't have enough volunteers to support all of the schools that we would like to. Sometimes we put you on a term rotation. But there's a lot of fantastic work going out, and you'll hear from the teachers who are on the talk tonight about some of the success stories that we have had, and it's happening all across the country right now. So I'm going to let Yvonne, because I could talk about this all day, but we want to get out away for our dinner tonight. So I'll let Yvonne talk about. Sorry, I told you I was going to get busy. What it means being a volunteer.
Thank you, Mel. That's what happens when you mention dinner. So yeah, just a little bit of information around kind of becoming a volunteer with the charity. Aware that some people on the call, you might have family or friends that are interested in actually becoming part of the visiting programme. So just to give you a little bit of background, I am a primary school teacher by background, and at the moment I'm working with Education Scotland. We got our dog Marley, who's a golden retriever, and he'll be 4 in next month actually. So a lot of people had said to us that Marley just had a really nice temperament, and had we thought about this kind of activity, I was really lucky in previous roles to have heard children speak so positively about dogs. I myself actually had quite a negative experience with dogs growing up, in that I was terrified of them, and I actually think if dogs had maybe been in and around the school, that would have helped me to overcome that fear a lot earlier than I did. I had to really work hard as an adult to overcome that. So we got in touch with the Therapet charity, and an assessor from the local area comes out to do a little bit of work with the dog. The kind of things that includes is, first of all, health-wise, making sure that the dog's vaccinations, their flea and worm treatment, their nails are of a suitable length, and making sure that they're just in that general overall good health. They also do some work with you and your dog, so making sure that your dog responds to prompts and commands, that your dog has commands like sit and wait. Also being able to kind of check that your dog will walk and not pull on the lead, because obviously when you're in and around all the different places that you visit, your dog is always on the lead with you, so we want to make sure that they're not kind of pulling or jumping or anything like that. And the assessor also does a little bit of work with the dog in terms of they make a loud noise to see if the dog will respond. Again, when you're out and about in places like schools and hospitals, you know, there's bells, there's alarms, there's all sorts of things going off. So they need to make sure that the dog is not alarmed by the loud noises. And they also do things like making sure that the dog can have its body touched, its tail, its paws, all of these different things, its ears. Again, sometimes with some of the people that we go in to visit, particularly in care homes, they can accidentally be a little bit rough with the dogs and things. So they just want to make sure that the dog has the right temperament, that it's not kind of going to automatically respond to that. Once your dog's kind of been passed for the assessment, you're then given a PVG check as a volunteer, and they also ask for 2 background checks just to make sure that, again, you're the right person for this role. And then you are then kind of matched up, as Mel said, with somewhere that they feel is suitable for your dog. So Marley and I were first matched up with a care home, and we continue to visit there once a fortnight. And the charity are really good in being able to match it to your availability. So for me, I do things at the weekends, I do things in the evenings, and I'm also very lucky that at the moment we do get some volunteer days that we're encouraged to use. So I'm able to do a little bit of that on a Friday afternoon as well. And again, we have a mixture of regular visits, so things like our care home, where we visit once a fortnight, but we are also invited along to one-off visits. So for example, if a workplace is doing a wellbeing event, then we've been asked to go in. We've done some work with colleges around exam time. And I think the important thing is that in the very first year you visit adult settings. I have to say, when I first signed up, I was like, really? You know, I'm a teacher. Can I not just go in with my dog into schools? But now with hindsight, that year is so important because I knew that Marley responds well around family and around our family's children and things like that. But I didn't at that point know 100% how he would cope in the unknown environment. And actually having a year allows me to settle into my role as a volunteer. It allows me to know actually what time of day is best for Marley to visit. Things like are there certain things that we're best to avoid? So, you know, if the fire alarm's going off, it's probably best to avoid that day. And also in terms of the volunteer role, it's very different to being a teacher, even if you are in the school. It's a different type of role that you're in. So it gives you a year to kind of familiarise yourself with that role as well. Things like I always take a toy in when I go to places with Marley because it kind of gives a starting point, and if people are a wee bit reluctant to engage, you know, it can often be a good way to kind of get the conversation going. Once you've done a full year of visiting adult settings, the dog can then be reassessed by the charity to see if they're suitable to work with children. And this is kind of the main bulk of what we're going on to talk about tonight, is the types of things that the therapeutes can do when they're in to visit with children and young people. And I think it's worth saying at this point, Mel, isn't it, that not all dogs are suitable to make that next step on. Some just remain as dogs that visit adult settings. So I'll hand back to you to talk a little bit more about that next step on to becoming a visit in schools and settings and the kind of work that they do in those visits.
Great, thanks. One thing that's also probably important to say is that any assistance dog, so for instance, if you have children in your school who maybe are fortunate enough to have an autism assistance dog or support dog, they can't become therapists because their job is to focus on that one child. And therefore, if we then have them being hugged and patted by everybody else, it's taken away from their role and the dog becomes confused. So we have a very sort of careful discussion with people who maybe their dog is an emotional support dog or whatever about the difference in the roles there. Our Reading with Dogs programme has been very, very successful. We started off initially just working in primary schools, and we based what we're doing around the Kennel Club standards, which as a school, I encourage you all, if you're going to have any dogs in school, have a read through them. They're in the links for you later on. They give very good guidelines on, you know, what to have in place, the age of the dogs. We're going to come on to that in a minute. But the Reading with Dogs programme, as you can see from the picture, these pictures were taken by sort of professionals or the schools who've shared them with us and given us permission to share these. The dogs have to be suitable in that they're going to be comfortable around a small group of children. They just sit there, they're non-judgmental. And what we found is recently that there is a big difference between how high schools and how primary schools operate, which you probably know. And obviously the difference in the way that the children behave. And it's about selecting the right dogs even for that, because some dogs might be better suited towards the older the students who are maybe more active in terms of their behaviour, shall we say. How do I say that politely? It's challenging sometimes, but not necessarily older ones. But you also get kids who are quite happy, quite quiet, who just need a quiet dog, calm. You can just go and sit down beside them and practice your reading. So we have a lot of sort of anecdotal evidence of children who are perhaps struggling with talking out loud, for instance, in class, and having some time with the dog will support them with this, and it will then transfer into other subject areas. But we have quite strict regulations on how long the dog will spend in that environment, and on any given day, if the dog is not happy for any reason, the session has to end, and that's just because the dog's welfare is the paramount thing here. So the dog has to be enjoying it as well. So we're going to hear a little bit about our Reading with Dogs programme and some of the success stories of that. So we're going to show you a recap of a video, if everyone can get that going.
Research suggests that children who aren't particularly good at reading or confident at reading can become stressed or nervous when reading out loud. So the purpose of having a therapist beside them is that the child will relax as the dog settles down, they'll stroke the attentive pet and become more relaxed, allowing them to focus on the task, which is reading, and therefore associate reading with a pleasurable experience. The child's reading will then improve and they'll build confidence and self-esteem, and obviously go away with a positive outlook on the task. Canine Concern Scotland Trust have been developing the Reading with Dog project for a number of years now and have had varying degrees of success within libraries. So when we were approached by Bannockburn Primary School, we were obviously extremely enthusiastic to come along and work with them, and it allows us to target the children who we feel would really benefit from the Reading with Dog service.
We've been doing it for about 3 years, and we got involved through dog training classes that we go to in Stirling, and I think Anne-Marie went as well with Dylan, and the person who runs it, Jim Fleming, is a great supporter of therapeutes, and he had suggested that Scruffy would be an appropriate dog to be assessed.
Well, when I retired, I always knew I wanted to do some sort of voluntary work, and I thought, oh, not with people, I'd rather do it with animals. My other dog decided he wasn't so enthusiastic, but this one is so cuddlesome. He loves the attention, just loves it, loves people touching him, and so he's thoroughly enjoying this, and he's been doing it for about 3 years, I think.
So when the learners return to class, I feel that they're much more engaged in learning generally, and they come back with a much more positive attitude. It's like they've got a little buzz about them. They seem much more relaxed, happy, and yeah, when they spend time with the dogs, they always come back with a smile on their face. I think generally the emotional well-being of some of the children has improved, and it has had a positive impact on them as a whole. However, thinking just about the reading and their engagement in reading, for me the proof is, as well as the smile on their face, they have a much more positive attitude to actually participating in reading activities in class. They're much more fluent at reading out loud because they're having more opportunities to and feel much more confident because they've had a non-judgmental audience. Really, for me, the attitude is it's the can-do attitude, and that they are willing to have a go and do it, and they can see how something can have a positive impact on their progress in reading, and then that has an impact on how they feel it can have a positive other
Continually striving to find innovative and creative ways to develop reader engagement in our school. And although this pilot project is still very much in the initial stages, the analysis has shown that the children have developed a really strong positive association with reading, and that this has had a significant impact on the level of reader engagement and enjoyment. So we're very, very proud to be the first school in Scotland to have been joined with Canine Concern Scotland Trust to develop this project, and we're very excited to see what the possibilities could be and what TheraPets could do for our school.
Okay, so that video it's about 10 years old now, so some of you may recognise those teachers, and they may be at other places now. But it gives a good indication of how it all started off and the progress that it was seen initially. One thing is that we get feedback from schools. We have a sheet that they can fill out, and I've designed a sheet for pupils as well. And if any of you would like to design us something that's a bit more teacher friendly, that would be great. Or have any suggestions on that, because it's good for us to know, how's it going. It also highlights to some of the teachers some of the issues around which pupils they select for the sessions with the dogs, whether they're going to take it seriously. I'm thinking that's probably more from a high school level perspective, but also, some of the children need to be in a smaller, quieter group, and it really does benefit them in other ways as well. So health and wellbeing groups and YPI groups in high schools, we do a lot of work with. We work with some counselling teams in schools now, primary and high schools. We also work with nurture classes, again, primary or high school, it doesn't really matter. Because we're finding that actually there's more of a sort of blur between, are we doing reading with dogs, or are we doing just general support to try and help pupils engage with their learning in a positive manner. So schools are seeing the benefits of the dogs across so many different areas. So some are really targeting reading with dogs, but some are using a sort of a bit of a mix of that and the sort of the nurturing, let's help people with their well-being. So there's lots and lots of ways that we're getting involved there. I'm going to hand over to some of the teachers now to get some of their feedback and experience from their real life experience of having our dogs in their school. Yvonne?
Thank you very much. Yeah, so we have a couple of teachers on the call, as we said at the beginning. So I'm going to hand over to Ailey, first of all, who is joining us from Niddrie Mill Primary School in Edinburgh. And Ailey, you have been lucky enough to have Sylvie working with some of the pupils in your school, haven't you?
Yeah.
So I'll hand over to you, and you can tell us a little bit about the kind of things that Sylvie has done. If you've got any tips for people on the call that are thinking about getting a dog to visit, I think that would be useful as well, just to kind of hear from somebody who's been there, done it, and lived to tell the tale.
Perfect. So I've sort of got I've sort of broken down what I'm going to talk about into sort of before we got her, what we sort of looked at, the actual visits themselves, so people can understand what we did in order to ensure the visits went well, and then some of the responses from the kids / impact. So the first thing I did was I was a class teacher at the time, and I had a child in my class who was a selective mute. And I was kind of like, he was one of those children that just sort of had, if you didn't, you wouldn't know he was there otherwise. And we've got a lot of quite challenging behaviour in our school, and I kind of just felt like we were always channeling quite a lot of our energies into those children, and I wanted to do something to try and make a positive impact for him. So his mum had told me he quite liked dogs, so I got in contact with Canine Concern, which has been shared. The actual link to the TheraPets website has been shared in the chat. And I kind of just thought it had come back and said, oh, there's a waiting list and you might wait a while. And I kind of just forgot about it. And I was kind of like, oh, well. And then I randomly one day just got a phone call, and I'd been told that we were being allocated a dog called Sylvie, who is, you can all see in that picture, she's absolutely gorgeous. And her owner, Katrina, got in contact with me, and we sort of spoke over email about arranging what the first visit would look like, who she was supporting, what the kind of needs they have. And she sort of told me the sort of things she needed, which were a quiet place, somewhere that they could access outdoors if needed, access to water. She also told me to be aware of like how they could access the room. Our school's really funny in terms of its design. So like she was like, if avoidable, like don't go up flights of stairs, try not to be somewhere where they're going to be passing a lot of children, like big loud spaces, things like that. And also the actual suitability of the room itself, like what furniture is in that room, is the space appropriate for a dog. So luckily for us, we have a room, we're sort of a dual campus, and we have a room that's sort of out with our actual school, and it's just on the peripheral. So it's actually quite a great room, and it has an access to our playground. So we used that room, and it had a sink, and it had a couple of tables and things, but they weren't really a problem while she was there. The next thing we had to do was create a risk assessment. We'd previously had Pause for Progress in our school, who worked with specific children. So we already kind of had a risk assessment for having dogs in the school. And then went and spoke to the parents that were going to be of the children that were going to be included, shared the risk assessment with them, and got their written permission just so they knew that it was happening. Initially, we had tried to include, well, the boy in my class that was the selective mute, and sort of like a positive listening and talking peer, so somebody to promote like good listening and talking skills, and somebody who was good at turn taking and things like that. And it sort of grew arms and legs, because it was initially just him and his friend. We then discovered in my stage partners class there was another selective mute, and she was very different, and she had different conditions as to how she was mute. So it was quite interesting, because we sort of expanded it to a couple of kids that had ASD as well, who happened to be really chatty and really bubbly. And we sort of ended up having to scale it back a wee bit, because some of those children were almost too chatty and would sort of dominate the sessions. So Katrina, Sylvie's owner, was really good at tailoring what we needed, and she was happy to have whoever. But we just had to look carefully at like how the groupings were going, and she was happy to just adapt and change as we moved on. So the actual visits themselves, you need to think about having like an appropriate member of staff. Initially, we'd gone for my classroom support assistant, and after the first session, we discovered that she was allergic. So that was quite challenging, trying to find somebody. Sylvie came every second week, so trying to find a member of support staff that liked dogs, that wasn't allergic, that was available. As most schools are, we're really tight on staffing and don't have a lot of flexibility, but luckily we managed to make it work. There was even some sessions, I had a student teacher at one point, so I was able to leave my class with him, and I was able to go to the visits, which were really nice to see the kids interacting. There always needs to be a member of school staff there to support the children, because the dog owner's job is to make sure that they're there to support the dog. You need to make sure the pupils are prepped, so before each session we would always make sure their hands were washed, that we ran through any risks, talking to the children about like touching their faces and various things. They made like a little food bowl and stuff for Sylvie so that she could get water, and talking about like splashing and things like that. So just germs and just general safety. And we were lucky the kids were in primary 4, so they were quite aware of the risks. For the first visit, Katrina, and to be fair, most of the visits, Katrina was amazing, because she was sort of led the sessions, I would say, and she would go by whatever Sylvie was feeling. Especially the first session, she was amazing at just like welcoming the kids and introducing them to Sylvie and telling them about what Sylvie was like. As I said, we initially just had one pupil, but she ended up supporting quite a few she was with us for about 2 years. So she supported about 8 to 10 different pupils, and like various mixes, until we sort of found the right combination. Towards the end of our sessions, we actually split the 2 children that were both mutes into different groups, because we found that sometimes, because they were both mute, it was quite difficult to get them to come out of their shell in front of each other. And so we actually split the sessions into 2 shorter half-an-hour sessions rather than one 1-hour session. And we found that it rebalanced the groups just a little bit. Yeah, we split the groups. Yeah, we also did mixing of different adults, so not only like spreading the support, but also putting in different adults into the mix to try and help the confidence of these kids that we were targeting, because the wee boy, he wouldn't speak to anybody in school. It didn't matter who they were. If they were on the school premises, he wouldn't speak to anybody, whereas the wee girl would speak to her friends, but she wouldn't speak to any adults out with, again, in the school building. So they both had slightly different things, and we were sort of looking at how we would help them both. As I say, Katrina led all of our sessions, and she was really good at like providing games and activities. She would do like hide and seek with the kids in Sylvie, which was their favourite game. And I mean, it's quite a small room, there wasn't many places to hide, but the kids really loved it. They would ask to play it every single time. Sylvie's not the most active of dogs, so the kids would sometimes want to play ball with her. And I mean, she would get involved in everything, and it was lovely. Yeah, Katrina was really good at letting the children know, like, if Sylvie was having a bad day, or not so much a bad day, but if she was maybe having a down day. Unfortunately, towards the end of our sessions, Sylvie was really, really unwell, and she was in hospital. You can actually see in that top left picture that she had a big bit of surgery, and I was amazed that Katrina brought her in. She obviously had some time off. And when Katrina brought her back in, she was really wonderful with the children, because she told the kids all about what had happened with Sylvie, what she'd been through, and the kids were really sweet. They'd made her like a little den, and they were like, oh, we're going to have a quiet session today. We're going to make a little den, and we're going to read stories to her. So that was her down there with one of our formerly mute children who's sitting reading her a book. And the wee girl is now not talking to everybody. She talks to me, and amazingly, she started talking to Katrina about halfway through our sessions, which was amazing, because for her, in her entire school career, she'd never spoken to any adults on the premises. So for both of them, there was huge changes, and the wee boy is now blethering away. We can't actually get him to stop talking. And there's just a few quotes there from the kids about Sylvie, and I went to go and speak to them the other day to go and get the quotes, and Sylvie left us in June. And yeah, I think I brought up some sad memories for them, because they really do miss her, and I think she made a huge difference in their lives. And the wee boy, his mum said that he used to mark it out on his calendar every 2 weeks as to when Sylvie was coming in, and he was really upset when she was away in hospital, because she was out of action for a couple of months. We were really lucky, because when she was out of action, Katrina had put us in contact with another therapist, Pepper, who'd come in I think once or twice, just to sort of reinstate the time with the kids so that they had something. But honestly, I cannot recommend them anymore, because I mean, these quotes are just enough from the kids. But as I say, they're both speaking now, and we think it's made a huge difference. And Sylvie, as we already heard at the start, is quite famous now, so most of my class knew who she was. So it was a really nice thing for our class to see like why Sylvie was here and what she was doing for other children. It's not just because my kids were all like, oh, they're just here to get her to speak. Whereas when we watched the dog squad, all the kids were like, oh, she actually has like a job, and it showed them that all the different jobs that she has to offer. And yeah, definitely huge amount of love in our school for this incredible dog. So yeah, if anybody's thinking about doing it, I cannot recommend their services anymore.
Thank you so much, Ailey. You speak with such passion about the dogs, and I think, you know, when the quotes came through on this slide, I thought you can really see the impact that these dogs have had to these children. So thank you so much. As I say, as we go through, if you've got any questions, we do have time at the end, and both Emma and Ailey will be available. So if you've got specific questions about their experience, you can pop that in the chat, and Janine will be keeping a little eye on that. We also have got Emma, who is joining us from Braes High School in Falkirk, and they have got their therapist, Jamie, and there are some similarities in how you've used Jamie, but there are also some things, as Mel was saying, that are maybe more secondary specific. So we'll hand over to you, and you can tell us a little bit about the work that you have done.
Hi there, can everyone hear me okay? Well, so we were fortunate enough to start working with Canine Concern Trust Scotland in 2018-2019. as a bit of a pilot project. So I'll talk a little bit about how that came about and how the project's kind of evolved and developed over the years. As you can see on the screen, this is Jamie. Jamie, our therapist, is a whippet. Perhaps not the dog we expected, but certainly the dog we needed. He's a fantastic therapist, along with his volunteer Jeanette, who is also an absolute asset to our school. We are so very, very lucky to have them both. So in 2018-2019, as part of our People Equity Funding Programme, Onwards and Upwards at Day's High, we approached Canine Concern about running a pilot project with our young people. So I had a young person in my form class who, quite like Ailey, was very, very quiet, almost didn't speak to anybody, but was particularly fond of dogs. We also had a couple of young people who really, really struggled with their attendance, and were also big, big fans of dogs. So I'd done a little bit of research into animal assisted learning, and having that research back up, I kind of approached my senior leadership team and said, look, I'd really like to try this out. And they were very accepting and were quite happy about trying anything. So we approached Canine Concern, and I met up with Lindsay and we had a chat about what the vision was and what we could potentially do. And we were certainly coming at it from a focus initially of it being as a support for young people with their attendance, with their mental health, and with literacy a little bit as well. So it was kind of a few things that we were looking at doing. After that meeting, our initial discussion about our plan, how it could work, Lindsay put us in touch with Jeanette, who brought Jamie in for a visit to our school. And after that, we kind of came up with a plan about a 6-week pilot project, and we did a risk assessment. Obviously, spoke to all the people that need to be spoken to about the challenges of bringing a dog into school. I think it was very, very important that we did those things. Having a risk assessment in place, but also going through Canine Concern Trust Scotland. I would not be bringing a dog into this school without them, because there are so many things that they know of that we don't. We don't have the insurance. There are so many things that can go wrong. And having Canine Concern Trust Scotland, we knew that all that was taken care of. We knew that coming into our school was a volunteer and a dog who were well equipped to deal with the challenges of being in a school, the stresses of being in a school. And that really, really, I think, eased a lot of people's minds. We also, as Ailey mentioned as well, we had a suitable space set up for Jamie. So we have a space in our library, which is kind of Jamie's den. He has his very own cushion, which the kids chose for him. And he's quite particular because there's an orange one and a red one, and he will not go near the orange one. So he has to have his red one. And you might be able to see from that picture there, he's actually got his school uniform on. So he has a braised tartan scarf that he wears alongside his Therapet bandana when he's in. So he has a setup in the library in a section that's a little bit away from everyone else. But what has actually been really nice is that section, although it's away from everyone else, it's kind of at the front of the library. So as young people are coming in, they can see Jamie, which has been really positive and leading us to have a little discussion about why Jamie's in school, the work that him and Jeanette do, and why it's such an asset to our school. So we've got our risk assessment in place, we've got our suitable space set up, and we have approached our pastoral heads and our key teachers about any young people who we feel would be benefit most from this support. So as I mentioned, I had a couple of people in mind, and pastoral had a couple of people recommended as well. And our initial 6-week project, it was very much kind of 20-minute sessions with Jamie, and they were in maybe no more than 2s or 3s. And we made sure that Jamie had time off as well. So Jeanette came in period before break, he was in over break and then after break, and it meant that he had a wee time to have to himself. We also identified a suitable spending space for him. That's quite important, I'm hasten to add. You also may wish to consider if his route to the spending space is via the canteen. Obviously, when kids are finished their break, sometimes things get left on the floor, and whilst Jamie is absolutely professional, a sausage on the floor is a temptation that you cannot resist. So once we had our young people identified, we sent a letter home to parents and carers just to make sure that people were okay with what was happening, were aware of what was going on, and wanted their young person to take part. But what we also did was we sent a letter home from Jamie to our young people saying, really looking forward to meeting you, this is what we're going to get up to, this is what we're going to do. And I think that really kind of encouraged some of our young people who are struggling to attend to really make a date in the diary to try and get in for that time. the programme just kind of evolved from there. So initially, you might be able to see on the next slide, there is a wee example of one of the booklets that we use alongside our Reading with Dogs programme. So while we initially started off with Reading with Dogs as part of attendance and mental health and literacy, it has evolved a little bit, but the initial approach was very much, we got them into school, we did a baseline questionnaire about how do you feel about being in school, how do you feel about reading, how do you feel about your literacy skills and things like that. And then, so that there was something to come in and talk to Jamie about, Jamie and the young person select a book, and then we had little sections that they would read each week, and we had questions in our booklet that they could discuss with Jamie and Jeanette, as well as reading out their book. And then at the end of the 6-week programme, we had another questionnaire so we could check against our baseline data what, if any, improvements have there been. And I'll go into the impact a little bit later on. I think once we'd done that, it was quite clear. Once we'd initially brought Jamie in, there were a lot of requests for support from Jamie. So we were quite clear about the right people getting time with Jamie and making sure that it wasn't just a case of anybody kind of got thrown in. We wanted to make sure that Jamie was working with the right people for the right reasons, and I think that is really important. We are, again, as I said, very, very lucky to have Jeanette, and if there was an occasion where a young person maybe was off sick, so they weren't there for their regular session, we had a process set up where our pupil support base, we had a list of names who were kind of as a reserve for Jamie, so that there was not really any time that Jeanette was in that was wasted. Once we'd done that initial project, because we're a secondary school, we were really thinking about how can we support our learners moving forward. And one of the things we identified was in the senior phase, reading for understanding. There's a lot of young people maybe looking to do National 4, National 5 who really struggle with that aspect of the course. So working with Jeanette and with our English department, we developed a Reading with Jamie senior programme which focused on reading for understanding and used the PULSE approach. That was really quite valuable, quite powerful, and certainly our teachers stated they noticed a real increase in confidence and independence from those learners who'd worked with Jamie, which was really positive for us. We were also really fortunate as well in that during exam time, Jeanette agreed to come in and students could book a little bit of a time with Jamie just before their exams to chill out, which was quite popular. What we also noticed is sometimes staff pop in to have a bit of a chill out time with Jamie. I think his favourite teacher is possibly our home economics teacher, but that might have something to do with the fact that she brings him ham quite regularly. In terms of impact, we have really noticed, and you'll see from the pupil comments here, the impact it's had on our young people. From the second Jamie walked into our school in that first meeting, and I was walking through the corridor with Jeanette and Jamie, you could see our young people visibly relaxing. You could see our staff relaxing. Smiles were coming on their face. People were talking to each other. People were smiling. There was a real positivity around having Jamie in our school. And I think that was certainly something that was a real initial positive, but what's been even more positive is seeing young people talk about the impact that Jamie's had with them, and also looking at our baseline data and being able to demonstrate from that our young people are feeling more confident. I think probably the best example I can give you is from one of our first groups that worked with Jamie, where at the start of the session, he was working with an assisted class and they would come in small groups to see him. And at the start of that, there was young people in that group who would not speak out loud in class at all. And at the end of their session, they did a presentation to Jamie in class, which involved each young person standing up at the front of the class, speaking to the class about something. And one young person who would not even speak in class was playing their violin for the class and for the presentation. So you could really see the impact that just having a bit of time with Jamie and Jeanette had made for these young people. I think I would absolutely sing Jeanette's praises here. Jeanette was hoping to come along today, but unfortunately she's had to attend a funeral today. But we have been so fortunate to have Jeanette, who is an ex-primary teacher. And Jeanette doesn't just want to come along and sit with Jamie. Jeanette wants to help our young people, and we talk about programmes, we talk about developing ideas and what would work. And I think that's been really positive for us, because the experience that Jeanette has as a teacher, but also as a therapeutic volunteer, has been really helpful in us in working out, right, how could we develop a programme that really works for secondary school. So at the tail end of last year, we really looked at a functional reading programme. So something we identified through our data analysis was that our young people are struggling with literacy across the school. So we asked faculties to provide a broad general education reading task that they use in their faculty and their departments, so that we could really focus on specific tasks, specific words, specific kind of reading, that functional reading that is going to be really useful to take to different places around the school. And again, that's been really positive, and it's been working with Jeanette that's let us do that. She's always been really keen to try things out and to get involved in the life of the school. Our school has also raised money for Canine Concern Trust Scotland through a staff pantomime, just as a way to kind of say thank you and give back. And I know that there's at least 2, I think, YPI groups are representing Canine Concern Trust Scotland this year. So in terms of the impact, confidence, mental health, literacy, all of these things are big tick boxes, but also attendance. We really noticed an improvement from some of our young people, because when they know they're getting time with Jamie, they're coming into school. And then, you know, there's that carrot to say, well, look, if we're coming in this day, we really need to come in this day before, and we could do this. And there's just so many more opportunities for our young people. I would add, I mean, if you're on this call, I would think, you know, this is not a gimmick. Having dogs in school, having animals in school, it's not a gimmick at all. I've done my practitioner inquiry on animal assisted therapy, and the research is there. We can demonstrate the impact that animal assisted learning has on our young people. And I think it's really important that as part of that, we do it right. It only takes kind of one incident to kind of make this really difficult for everybody else who's doing it. So it's so important to have that risk assessment in place. It's so important to go through the right channels with Canine Concern Trust Scotland. So important to have a space for the dog and downtime for the dog as well. It's also important to talk about your plans with your school. You know, we identified there's a member of staff who was allergic to dogs, but fortunately they're on the 3rd floor, so our space is on the 1st floor. We also made sure that we'd spoken to our cleaning team about, you know, would it be possible to make sure we get this space hoovered really thoroughly after Jamie's been in, just in case there's any young people who have allergies. But what we have tend to find is any of our young people who have allergies are popping an antihistamine because they want some time with Jamie. So I would add again, we are so lucky to have Jeanette and Jamie. It's been such a positive experience at Braes High School, and I would really encourage anybody to look into it, but I would really think about what is it you want to get out of it. What is it that's going to be the benefit to your young people? How will it change things for your young people? How will it improve things for your young people? And how can you demonstrate that impact as well? Because, you know, we're all working in education. We all have to think about, well, what is the impact of the things that we do? Why are we doing this? And what is the purpose of it? So yeah, a huge thank you to Canine Concern Trust Scotland. We're really lucky to have the support of you, and I feel very fortunate because I know we got in early, and I know there's probably a massive waiting list now. Certainly every time I speak to Jeanette, I feel really bad because we talk about Canine Concern Trust Scotland all over the shop at stuff we do, and I know she gets loads of phone calls now, but yeah, Jamie's locked in, he's got his brace tie, he's going nowhere.
Thank you so much again. You know, I think you've really just brought everything to, you know, that Mel and I have spoken about to life here. And again, just great to hear the kind of impact that this has had on the children and young people within your school. So again, thank you so much for sharing your experience there. I see somebody's asking to possibly read some of your research there, Emma, so we'll maybe link you up with that person so that they can maybe chat a little bit more about the research behind it. I'm actually thinking, Mel, that, you know, this slide is pretty redundant because I think Emma and Ailey have kind of covered everything that we were going to say.
I think so. Ladies, you've done a fantastic job. And I know, you know, when you're in schools, it's all about money. And if you're getting allocated PEF money and you're thinking of using that towards something like this, and being able to show figures of, you know, that baseline and then how the pupils have progressed. I mean, that's amazing that you're going to that much effort and doing it, because that really is, you know, as I said, we get a lot of anecdotal evidence, but to hear what you've actually done in both the primary and the secondary schools in terms of monitoring pupil success, that's brilliant. And you know, as an ex-teacher myself, I just love hearing about this. It's great. I think what we also, the next couple of slides, I think, Yvonne, I think we just let people read them because it's all about quotes from pupils. One thing I would say is, you were talking about space. If you're looking at bringing dogs into schools, obviously we cannot support everybody. We just don't have that facility. But we don't have enough volunteers around the country. But the benefits of having a volunteer, which both ladies kind of touched on there, the volunteer is not a school personnel, and therefore the relationship that they will have with your pupils will be different. And so that's something that's also interesting to note, because I mean, a lot of teachers want to take their dogs into school, and that's something which, again, you know, well, you're going to have a different relationship. I mean, obviously, a volunteer's bringing something in. Not all of our volunteers are maybe as capable as Jeanette and Katrina, because they've maybe got grandchildren or children, but they're maybe not as hands-on because they just don't know where to go, because they're not from a teaching background. They're just people who are interested in sharing their dog with the pupils and seeing how that can help improve their learning or their health and well-being. So it's worth thinking about, well, you know, if I'm considering going down the route of having a dog in the school, should it be a staff dog or should it be somebody else that's doing this? And we're going to talk about that in a second.
Yeah, and as I said, we'll send you out a copy of these slides, and somebody was asking in the chat, is it being recorded? And it is, so it will be available through the Education Scotland website once that's been uploaded by our digital person there. So yeah, again, you can just see how much the feedback reflects the kind of the children's enjoyment and the things that they get out of it. We've touched on a few of these things, and it was great that Emma and Ailey, you've actually touched on a number of these things as well. And I can also see that there are questions coming into the chat, which Janine has been keeping an eye on. Mel, I hope you've got a few more people lined up to be covering the inbox, because I can imagine that there'll be quite a few people interested, either thinking about the possibility of somebody they know maybe becoming a volunteer, or thinking about maybe for their school, is it something that they can consider? So we've included all the different ways that you can get in touch, and also you can get on and have a look at just some of the other images and things that are online as well. Again, it kind of gives a flavour of the work that the charity does. Keep posting your questions, but really, Janine, I'm going to kind of hand over to you, because I know that you've been tracking the questions as they've been coming in, and also some questions that we had in prior to the session, so that you can kind of direct them to the most appropriate person, whether it's myself or Mel or Emma and Ailey.
Yes, thank you very much, Yvonne. Yes, the questions have been coming in fast and furious in the chat. I'm going to ask one which I think many people want to know the answer to. It's a little bit, I'm going to roll two questions together. It's a little bit around the risk assessment and where you can find examples of those. And the second one is about insurance. Can you just make it a wee bit clearer about, you know, where you get and what sort of insurance you need? So I think that's to Mel, really.
Right. Okay. I think obviously there are some schools who have dogs in currently that are not associated with us. And if you're considering going down that route, what I would suggest is you look very, very carefully at your insurance policies. I know that some staff members who've wanted to take their dogs and have been told that they should look at their own insurance policies, their pet insurance plans. And unfortunately, most of them do not cover you to take your dog to work. So that's the first thing you need to consider. Obviously, if you come to an organisation such as ours, we have public liability insurance up to £5 million, and that is critical because some organisations only offer it up to £1 million, and we don't feel that's enough in this day and age. So, and obviously, if you look at the Kennel Club standards as well, you really want to go for the highest amount possible, just in case. There's always more risk aversion with children because they're much more unpredictable, and because they're young and inexperienced around animals, than there is with perhaps the elderly or with an adult. So risk assessments, we've got quite a comprehensive risk assessment, which we share with all the schools that we work with. What our insurance only covers us as volunteers though. So we have some people who are volunteers with us who are also working in schools. Now, what that means is that they cannot take their dog into school while they are working because their employer sees their duty of care being to the pupils. Whereas our insurance is only for volunteer work. It's not while you are being paid to do your daily job. So they sometimes say, well, why can't we be a therapist? And I know there's one council in Scotland just now is recommending people come to us who are working in schools to get their dogs assessed as therapists so they can then work in the school with the dog. But unfortunately, that doesn't work because again, our insurance only covers volunteering hours, not whilst you are being paid to work. So again, just you have to be really, really careful with that sort of distinction. What I would say too is if you are looking at things like somebody's own personal pet insurance, they may say you cannot take your dog to work with you. So just double check, triple check all of those things. The business managers, the head teachers, the local authority may want to have, some sort of overall action plan about how this is going to be put in place. So it needs to be sort of pushed up the chain a little bit, not just an individual department's role. And I think it's quite clear from the schools that you talked to about that. The type of dog doesn't really matter. It's more about the breed of dog doesn't really matter. It's more about the actual dog's temperament and suitability, as Yvonne was saying earlier on, in terms of the number of dogs we've got. It's who is appropriate for that specific role. So we don't accept banned breeds, but we do accept breeds which have a lovely nature and just love interacting with people and children in particular. Our dogs also are just dogs. Just remember that. Any dog in a school is always just a dog. It's an animal, and you have to keep that in your mind at all times.
I think that answered a couple of people's questions, because I know Mrs. Callaghan had asked about a breed of dog or temperament. Was there a specific type? So I think you've answered that. And also Jonathan had asked about teachers using their own dogs. So I think you've sort of covered that. That's really good. But Katie wanted to know, is there a starting age? She's got a cockapoo. Her cockapoo's a 1. She thinks she's got a good temperament. Is there a starting age?
Well, what we do is if you think of a dog as like a baby or a small child, you wouldn't take your baby out and small child out and expose it to lots of different things until it has grown up a little bit, developed its immune system. So we feel that puppies are very much the same way. They're young, their immune system's not developed, they bite, they pee, they poo, they scratch, they chew things. So we don't allow any dogs under the age of 1 year to become therapets. Now, if you look at the Kennel Club Barking Reid standards, they're pretty much the same. It's a year before dogs, but we also have that additional year where we have them working with adults just to get experience in different environments. So basically, any dog that's with us is going to be at least 2 years old before it goes into a school. Now, if you know of any organisations that actually specifically train dogs to be in school for a length of time, most of them tend to be down south, actually. There's not really very many in Scotland that do that. We only have a 2-hour maximum limit for any day for a dog, because they get really tired with all that sensory overload. And then going to put them somewhere in an office, they're still tired. They're still hearing what's going on in the background. So we don't do that. That's the best thing about being a volunteer. Going in, having the dog there for up to 2 hours, usually it's less than that, but it depends on the environment, and then taking them away again so they can rest and just be a family pet again. Dogs that are trained to be in school for longer periods than that, it can take 2 to 3 years to train them. So you're looking at a dog that is going to be 2, 3, 4 years old. Sorry, one of them is barking.
Right, and now I don't think, did I miss it there? Because I know there's a good website that has examples of risk assessments. And did you mention that, or did we skip it? Can you remember where there's
I can't remember. I don't know where. I know certainly we will share risk assessments with schools. If people want, they can have. You're welcome to have a look at ours. Obviously, share it with the schools that we're working with. But that is from the charities perspective. So schools, I know you have your own risk assessment format, and it does tend to vary slightly across different regions. But if you're wanting any help or guidance on that, then obviously we can put some samples up, or schools we can share, because there are some schools that already have dogs in for longer periods, and that will have risk assessments developed as well. But I think obviously the key things are looking at your allergies, your phobias, and again, it is the staff as well as the children, making sure your insurance is in place, having all the discussions about the use of the spaces, the dog's time out, and what happens on any given day if the dog's not well or the children are not well. The teachers have covered that brilliantly. But it's got to be carefully planned. Don't rush into it is the key thing here, I would say. So really, and bottom line is, even though the dog is helping us, it's all about the dog getting something back from it too. Otherwise, the dog doesn't go in. Think about the times that the dog's going in and out of school. I was in a school in West Lothian the other day, and it was great because they said, right, we need to get you out now because the bell's about to go and there's going to be 1,000 pupils walking up and down the corridor. We don't want to stress the dog out. So those are the kinds of things you need to think about as well, not just the actual space. So yeah, lots and lots of things. I'm happy to chat to anybody as well outside this call if you want to chat through what we do in some schools.
There's a good tip. Sharon Wilson has shared that the Care Inspectorate has a great tool with information on having dogs in settings. And I know I used to run a residential school and used dogs in those settings. So that's a good tip to have a look to as well. We've got a couple more questions. Alison wants to know, do you work in early years? And also Martine, I was a bit unsure of whether Martine's a childminder, and she wanted to know, could she use her dog? I wasn't sure if she was referring to a childminding setting, which would link in with early learning and childcare, or if it was her dog going into school. I wasn't totally sure. But do you work with early years, that pre-primary 1 level?
We do. We sometimes get asked to work with children who are maybe, you know, they're nervous. It's not our key areas that we work with, but we are. I know certainly in Aberdeen we're working in some schools there with the nursery groups. We've been asked to work with some care experienced children at nursery or who are showing difficulties in interacting socially with people and animals. And we're also working with some young people who are just nervous about going into different environments, particularly, you know, after COVID. We worked with primary ones, for instance, when they were scared about going back to school after lockdown. So yeah, we can. The problem is with under 5s, it's a bit more difficult because they all just want to be hands-on with the dog all the time. So you have to be quite careful and manage that. And even some of the dogs that we go into schools, we have to be very, very selective about which one of them would then go into that type of environment. So, you know, even within that, there's a sort of hierarchy, so to speak, as to what we would consider.
Okie dokie. I've got a few more questions. I've got 2 good ones here from Jill Cooper. She wants to know, if 1, are you connected to PAWS? And 2, would it make a difference if the dog's intact or complete?
Right, I'm not sure. What do you mean, Pause for Progress, or we have a program called Pause Against Stress?
It was just PAWS, right, with a PAWS in capitals, so I don't know what it stands for.
PAWS, if that's the Pause for Progress, which is the University of Stirling research program that started initially, that goes into Polmont, the young offenders, and they work with them. That's about one of the few prisons we don't go into because we let them do their research work, and we tend to work in the adult prisons. I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to. It doesn't matter if a dog's intact or not, as long as, you know, their character is fine. We sometimes go into places, and if there is another dog there, you know, we have to sort of manage how that works. We would never have 2 agencies with a dog in there at the same time, one from each one, just in case something happened, just really for insurance purposes. When we go into schools, that very rarely happens, but it might do in another setting where a staff member in a care home, for instance, has got their dog in, or a family member. So it's about sort of managing all of that. If a dog's intact and it's there's another dog in season, then we will obviously, the dog in season doesn't actually attend any sessions because we don't want anything happening or upsetting other dogs. As a charity, we have to do everything we can to minimise risk. And that is basically what the other things that we do are things like they're not raw fed because we go into so many NHS environments. They have to be vaccinated, so they're not passing on any zoonotic conditions. So leptospirosis, for instance, is something that can come from rats around fields, around urban areas. It doesn't really matter if your dog's off lead running, it could potentially pick something up. So we ask that the dogs are vaccinated. So we've got a lot of policies and protocols in place. So there are lots of things around the dog's health and well-being too that you need to think about if you're bringing in, and if that dog is likely to work with someone who might be immunosuppressed, either staff, pupils, whatever. So lots and lots of different things that you also need to think about from that angle. Right, somebody's putting pausetherapydogs.com. I'm just going to look that
Yeah,
up and
I've
I'll
just
come
had
back
a
to you.
wee look. So it's Pause Therapy Dog Training. So it's a different organisation, isn't it, Mel?
Yes,
So it's not
it's
affiliated.
not us. No, it's not us.
So I do have a few more questions, which I'm maybe going to ask Yvonne and Ailey and Emma. And I'm also going to, I'm very aware that Una's on the call here from Dogs Trust. So I might come to you, Una, if you've got anything to add after those two. So I'm going to give you some time to think. And don't worry, just put it in the chat if you don't want to contribute at all. So Yvonne, I'm going to ask you, because I think there's a few people here who have thought, my dog might be suitable for this. And so what sort of things are included in the volunteer induction? So in other words, what do you learn when you're becoming a volunteer?
Yeah, so the charity give out quite an extensive kind of guidance pack that goes through lots of the things that Mel has talked about in terms of kind of when you're on the visit, things to consider, you know, keeping them on the lead, making sure that they're only wearing the lead flash when they're actually on the visit, you know, can't sneak them into Marks and Spencer's to have a coffee with me or anything like that. I think as well, it's also about the induction that you get in the setting that you visit. So for example, having maybe time to chat with the principal teacher or the member of staff that's going to be running the sessions is very useful as well, just to help establish kind of what's the purpose of the visits. You know, is it for a reading side of things? Is it with particular children and social skills? And I think that's also when you can bring in little bits like if there's particular things to maybe avoid saying, avoid talking about, you know, the worst thing to happen is to have had a great reading session and then say, oh, take that book home and read that to mum and dad. And then actually that's a big trigger for the particular child that you're working with. So just knowing little bits of information, obviously nothing that's kind of sensitive or confidential, but if there's anything to just be aware of, I think that's useful to include in terms of your induction, your sort of first meeting. And again, time to maybe just check in every so often, just to kind of make sure that the visits are going the way that the school or the setting we're kind of anticipating. If there's any little bits that we can tweak, if there's maybe children that we want to switch out of the groups, that kind of thing. But I know Ailey and Emma might have other bits to add to that as well.
Yes, so go on. Does any of the other volunteers have anything to add to that? Because if not, there's a way, just at Pause Therapy Dogs, I think Jill, is it Jill that's come back and said they're online courses with no official monitoring or accreditation. I'm not sure if that's
no.
Okay, that's
there
fine.
isn't an official body that oversees any of this in the UK, and this is one of the issues with like emotional support dogs, PTSD support dogs, any types of therapy dogs, because they're not officially recognised like in the same way that an assistance dog is. So there are various places, and that's just one of them that offers online training. But there's nobody sort of accrediting all of these different courses. So I would say if you want to do something like that, do your research into what they're offering and for the cost, because there are different ones, obviously. I don't know anything about them. I'm not saying anything about the quality or anything like that. All I'm saying is have a look at different ones and see whether it meets your needs and what you're getting for your money, because some of them can be quite expensive.
Okay, and so this next question is for sort of Ailey and Emma, because we've heard all of the positives and you've given us quite a bit of information about learning spaces and length of time that dogs can go into school and everything else. Ailey and Emma, is there any places that you wouldn't recommend in the school, and have you had any things you went, oops, that didn't work? Because I think sometimes we need to know some of the things that don't work as well.
Yeah, I would say our school's quite busy. We're not particularly big school, but there is a lot of action going on in our school. As I've said, quite a lot of challenging behaviour. So just trying to ensure that the space is they're not going to collide at any point. Because there was one day we had the room that Sylvie was using is sort of like diagonally opposite our PE hall. And the kids from my class caught wind that Sylvie was in there, and then the entire class tried to go and see Sylvie, and they were up at the window, and it was all the big excitement. And it was maybe one of the reflections for me was maybe like, if I had told the kids, oh, by the way, Sylvie's in here, this is what her job is beforehand, because it wasn't until later on that we actually talked about Sylvie. It was when the dog squad thing came out. So maybe informing other children that she was there. We didn't want to advertise it too much because not every child was going to get the opportunity to meet with Sylvie or work with Sylvie, and all of our kids seem to think there's this magical list you can go on, and yeah, so we just thought, yeah. So being realistic with other children in the school as well, just so that they're aware of, no, you can't go up onto the window and bang on the window. I know that's really exciting. I mean, luckily Sylvie's impeccably behaved, so it wasn't a problem, but just, yeah, maybe making more people around the school more aware of what's happening.
So that preparation of the learners and maybe the rest of the staff as well in preparation for the visits is, you know, could make the difference for things. What about yourself, Emma?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think we're a little bit luckier in a secondary school, because we can kind of have the conversation with the young people about, here's Jamie and why he's here, and who might see him, and there's more kind of acceptance of that. Don't get me wrong, there is still a queue to see Jamie, and it's mainly staff going, I haven't met Jamie yet. But I think having a very clear process about why Jamie's in, who's working with him, I think that's really important, because it kind of removes some of that, well, why am I not getting? And we're very clear that we try to do, certainly when we started off, 6-week blocks, and then it would be a new rotation of young people. So people knew they got 6 weeks with Jamie, and then it was other people got a chance. And if there were situations where young people wanted to visit Jamie again and somebody was off, you know, we could make that work. But I think, again, it comes down to that rigorous planning as to why you're bringing a therapy pet into your school and what the aim is to get out of it. I think we've certainly seen, when we first started off with Jamie, I had fewer requests for young people to work with Jamie. Now, I mean, the English department, it's when's my class next, pretty much, because everyone has seen the benefit of it and seen how much of an impact that Jeanette and Jamie can have. We're also very lucky in that Jamie is the most laid back dog in the world. Nothing seems to stir him from his slumber. So when he's moving around the school, we do make sure that he's moving around at times when pupils are, but obviously sometimes if things get delayed or whatever, that doesn't happen. And we're a school of just over 1,000 pupils, so it can be quite busy. But again, our library is very close to, you know, he doesn't have to go on a big walk all the way throughout the school. He's pretty close to reception, and all our young people know Jeanette and know Jamie when they're coming into our school, so they're quite used to it now. But I would echo what Ailey said, which is it's really important to kind of have those conversations as to, there's going to be a dog in school, here's why there's going to be a dog in school, here's the purpose behind it, here's where he will be found. And that partly ties in with your stuff about allergies and phobias as well. If young people know there is a dog in the library and they've got an allergy, they're not going to go there. Or if a member of staff has a phobia of dogs and there's going to be a dog in the library, they know not to go there at this day and at this time. But I'm trying hard to think of negatives. I don't know if we've just been really lucky. Other than the occasional incident in terms of messing, there have not been many, I would hasten to add, but there has been perhaps one occasion where we have had to get a bit of a clean on the stairwell. That might have been related to the sausage incident, I don't know, but that would probably only be the one downside that I could think of at the moment. Everything else has been absolutely brilliant.
So you haven't had a situation like I've had, now this was 25 years ago with a dog a long time ago, where your dog's eating my pieces come from. So that it's good that hasn't happened, and obviously the dogs are very, very well trained. Mel, were you going to add something to this?
I was, but menopause brain just kicked in, so sorry.
That's okay.
No, I think, ladies, I think it's, everything that you've said has been fantastic, because it is, again, health and well-being of the dogs. You are going to come across issues like that. If our dogs are ever sick, we actually say to folks, do not take them on that given day. We had somebody who was going to visit a school recently. They put the dog in the car. the dog vomited on the boot of the car, and they just put the dog back in the house, phoned the school and said, we're not coming, and we can't come today, the dog's not right. So little thing. Oh, Yvonne, you had experience of that recently as well with Marley, didn't you?
Yes.
So yeah, it's about just you know, there will be times when things like that do happen, but you've got to put everything in place so that you're anticipating most of those things happening. And I think whatever you decide to do moving forward, the general outcome is going to be positive. I think sometimes too, we focus a lot on the kids who, you know, are benefiting from things like their PEF money, but the overall school community benefits. You know, you guys mentioned the impact on the staff, mentioned on, you know, you sometimes forget the kids who are kind of middle of the range, and those kids really benefit from seeing a dog around the school as well, even if they don't get to spend much time with it. I've remembered what I was going to say. Now, we've actually got a lady on this call too, who is one of our volunteers, but actually who's a PhD researcher at Edinburgh University, and she did some work recently into our PhD into online sessions with the dogs. So over the pandemic, we weren't able to offer school visits. Everything had to shut down. So we did some work with them, but she had a lot of success with her PhD work in terms of looking at, well, how can we offer reading with dogs online, you know, virtually? And apart from the fact that you didn't have the tactile experience of the dog, what she was finding, and she'll be happy to share some of that with you if Education Scotland would like some of that research, I'm sure. Then it was also that things like the fear and the allergies then weren't an issue because the dog wasn't in the building. So we sometimes do that with organisations and schools as well when we can't offer a face-to-face visit, because if you're away in the middle of nowhere somewhere, we've not got any volunteers, we could maybe offer you a remote session, which again, you're not getting that tactile experience, but it's somebody different. It's a different face rather than their teacher with the dog there. If you're lucky enough to get your dog to sit still in front of the camera, because mine's nowhere to be seen now, so that, you know, it has to be something that works.
Janine, I was just going to pick up on a couple of wee points from the, I think from the slide that we've maybe not quite touched on. So in terms of, we've spoken a little bit about that kind of emergency situation in terms of like the dog being ill, the children being ill, a fire alarm, but also with some of the children that might be coming forward to take part, it is worth making sure that your volunteer is aware of safeguarding procedures, because again, do you know, it might be that something arises in conversation that's just really useful to make sure that that is passed on, but also if it is something that is reaching more into safeguarding, that has been recorded and dealt with in accordance with your local authority or your kind of settings ways. And I think the other thing, you talked a little bit around that preparation with learners. Sometimes you can find that children are very overly confident with dogs, and they maybe have family dogs that they're used to, you know, picking up with and playing really rough and putting hands in mouth and things like that. And so actually on the slide that comes up next, we've signposted to some of the different reading that you can have a look at, and one of them is about actually work you can do with children ahead of a dog visit to get them used to kind of how to interact well with a dog, because for some it's an over familiarity with dogs, and for others they've maybe not had a dog to interact with, so they're not quite sure. So we've got a few different links that you can have a look at. As Mel spoke about, the bark and read standards is really useful for completing. If you're going through your risk assessment, just kind of looking at each section of that and making sure that you've got bits of that covered. And we've also got the link from Learning with Dogs Trust, which Janine had posted in the link. This covers people who are thinking more of a school-based dog. And as Mel said, there's an awful lot more considerations that need to go in if you're thinking about having a dog in all day, every day, because in terms of breaks and responsibility and vet bills and all of that. So again, a few signposts if schools are thinking about that. Janine, you've mentioned this already, but I'll just pop it up there. We are asking if you're able to complete our evaluation form, so you can either scan it if you've got another device with you, or Janine will hopefully post the link in the chat. If it asks you what you've attended in question 6, just please put in Therapet webinar, and that way we can filter out our evaluations. But I don't know if anybody else has got anything to kind of add, aware that time is marching on.
I know we're really tied up for time, but there's I won't put Emma on the spot here, and I know you mentioned somebody who's in the meeting who has research around that online contact and visit with a dog. If they give us permission, we'll try and find a way to share it with you, because we usually send you out some feedback post the session, so you can access the slides, and we'll add it to that if we can, but I don't want to put the individuals on the spot here. But very, very quickly, we've got the evaluations in the book. If Una from Dogs Trust, is there anything you'd like to add? But don't feel obliged that you have to. So I know I'm putting you a bit on the spot if you're still here.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to express my gratitude for getting to come along to this. It's absolutely incredible to hear about all your work and how evidence-based everything is. And just hearing you, Mel, speak about particularly the benefits to the dogs as well. It's just really, really cool. So yeah, thank you so much for letting me learn from you.
Thank you.
That's fabulous. And I've just had in the
Jill.
chat there that Jill's happy to share the research, so we'll try and get some links and pop it into the emails that go out and in the future, and we'll contact Emma to see if her collaborative inquiry is in a suitable format that could be shared, and if she was willing to. Well, I think, is that us, ladies?
I think so, yes.
But I think the stars of the show are on the screen right now, including the speakers.
Definitely. No, the dogs. It's always the dogs. They never want to know the people's names. It's always the dogs, remember.
Yes, the number of times I'm asked, am I Willow's mummy? Because nobody knows my name. So thank you, everybody.
It's been great. Thank you, folks. Thank you for allowing us to join your session, and thanks to everyone for showing such a great interest in dogs, because they are wonderful. I am so lucky. I gave up a job in teaching, and now I go around the country drinking coffee, visiting places, playing with dogs all day, and I love it. So I think everybody here is passionate about the way that we interact with animals. But thank you all so much for coming. And thank you, ladies at Education Scotland, and to the two ladies from the two schools for contributing so much. That's brilliant to hear. I love it.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, Mel, for your time as well, because I appreciate you are very pressed as a very small team behind the charity. So thank you so much for everybody that's come along. I really hope people have found that useful tonight, and you'll have our contact details. If there's any questions, you can contact Mel directly, or if it's something more school related, you can contact us at Education Scotland. But safe travels home to everybody, and thank you for joining us.